distracted by the comments. I'm gonna start. Oops. Hi, guys, and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. I'm your host, Moose, and this is my producer, Nick. Our main discussion is about Islam in the 21st century. However, we will critique other religions and ideologies. We condemn any form of discrimination, violence, misogyny, slavery. We do, however, embrace many perspectives and free speech if it is factual and correct, and not based on any hate. Throughout the show, we will be exploring different religious beliefs, practices, and their impact on society, ranging from politics, interpersonal relationships, and mental health of believers and non-believers. We hope to create an open dialogue for those who feel they're not heard, especially those who have doubts and have left their belief systems. If you are interested in exploring the complex topic of religion and wish to be part of an honest and open dialogue, this is the show for you. We also welcome feedback and discussion from our audience and listeners. The Gin and Tonic Show is a free speech platform where you can express your ideas without any fear of violence and repercussions or any consequences. Please do join our discussion in the live chat as well as the comments. Thank you for stopping by and enjoy the Gin and Tonic Show. Good evening and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. I am your host, Moose, the Gin and Tonic Show himself, and I am joined by a very well-mannered, very well-cultured, very sophisticated, cultured Ginny.
Hello. I'm the one that is going to make everything complicated for you.
Yes,
our
he will come
viewers.
into your nightmares. He will come into your dreams, especially if you have very extreme views. And he will say, no, everything is complicated.
It very much is.
Yes.
And the things we are going to discuss now are extremely politically complicated things.
Yes, especially regarding the political situation in not just the Middle East, but we've also extended towards South Asia as well. There was news of Iran attacking Pakistan and Pakistan responding. So we do have some tensions rising within the region. Yes, Ginny, you were saying, gonna say something?
Yes, but I will probably add more later on this show.
Yes. So if anything, like it started off with we'll react to this news item. This is from the BBC, that is, and they do clarify that this was in response to the Pakistan, like Pakistan was responding to Iran. But let's watch.
has confirmed it's carried out missile strikes inside Iran, targeting militants of Pakistani origin. Earlier, Iranian media reported that several missiles had hit a village on the Iran-Pakistan border in the Sistan-Baluchistan province.
Now, keep in mind, with Balochistan itself, there's 3 different Balochistan. There's the Pakistani Balochistan, there's the Iranian Balochistan, and then there's the Afghanistan Balochistan. So this is from Sistan, Balochistan, and yeah, apparently there's several strikes. It wasn't just one.
A number of people reported to have been injured. It comes 2 days after Iran conducted strikes inside Pakistani territory, saying it was targeting anti-Iran groups.
Of course, so Iran started this. If anything, Ginny and I were just discussing this. Iran kind of picked the fight. Yeah.
Pakistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a statement about its military action inside Iran. It says it used specifically targeted precision strikes against Pakistani terrorists who've based themselves in ungoverned spaces inside Iran. It says it had shared evidence of their activities, but no action was taken. And it says Pakistan acted now because it had credible intelligence of impending large-scale terrorist activities.
This morning, Pakistan undertook a series of highly coordinated and specifically targeted precision military strikes against terrorist hideouts in Sistan-Baluchistan province of Iran. A number of terrorists were killed during the intelligence-based operation.
Now, this isn't the first time Pakistani military has suspected terrorists from Iran. That is, this isn't the first time, though. And this
also add one thing too. This is actually much more. I mean, Pakistan is saying that they are aiming at terrorists, but it's more or less a tit for tat. And considering that Iran started it, they probably would have been just better to say, "Oh, we just launched these, missiles as a retaliatory strike due to Iran's strike."
Yeah, I feel like that would have been a more honest approach. But
it would probably also have been better, but I mean, I understand still why Pakistan does this, because if you act weakly against Iran, then you are going to be seen as easy prey for, the Iranic regime to continue escalating.
Yeah, I think they just didn't want to escalate it further, or also kind of maintain some international support as well.
I mean, they would probably get more international support, but it's probably because they want to send a signal. Hey, I don't, as you said, I don't want to escalate this, but back off.
Yeah, it's kind of like a pushback, if anything. So let's hear what this lady also further says.
Codenamed Marpar Sarmachar. This morning's action was taken in light of credible intelligence of impending large-scale terrorist activities against Pakistan by these terrorists. This action is a manifestation of Pakistan's unflinching resolve to protect and defend its national security against all threats.
Let's go straight to
the irony of this, though. The irony of this. There's a lot of terrorists walking free in Pakistan, especially a lot of people who are involved in terrorist activity, whether it's the Taliban, the Lashkar-e-Jhangvi. So this is kind of a weird, ironic. This is a bit of a weird paradox. And at the same time, we also feel that this so-called credible evidence is, I feel like it's window dressing at this point.
I mean, this has more to do with just retaliation for previous strikes.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I mean, I think that Iran is doing this entire, first strike thing just in order to escalate the situation, because they want to create outer enemies that they can unite the people behind.
Yeah. Sunni versus Shia is this the week? I mean, it could. This I will delve into this history as well too.
I think that this has more to do with power politics and real politics of keeping power. Sure, the regime is highly religious and connected to Shia Islam, and Pakistan is a Sunni state. But I think it has more to do with the regime in Iran wanting to stay in power, being very shaky right now, and trying to create outer enemies to unite the people behind them.
And of course, we have a Pakistan that no, don't do this, don't do this. Anyway, so yeah, basically right now, like Ginny, you said, it is more of a
Could you
retaliation.
please give some context to that thing with Pakistan Zindabad for our viewers that aren't in the know?
Pakistan Zindabad literally means Pakistan lives forever. I know you're probably trolling. But Pakistan Zindabad means Pakistan live forever, or Pakistan lives. It's more of a war chant, if anything. Like, it's become this war chant of sorts. Like, especially
considering that they were just attacked. I mean, sure, they launched this counterattack, but considering that they were just attacked firstly now by Iran, there are some, you know, situations where I can actually excuse nationalism, and that is when you protect yourself, and you know.
At the same time, I'm a bit scared of this chant because, again, it does get very radical from time to time, especially considering Pakistan's internal situation, that is, because internally we still have
you have a lot of ethnic minorities, religious minorities. You have other groups that have been exposed, but still, I mean, I understand when you try to group up.
It's not just that. Politically speaking, too, because politically Pakistan is very divided, especially with Imran Khan being in jail. That is. Imran Khan was the former prime minister, and the Pakistani military is currently, you know, they announced that there will be elections, but they are not letting him or his party, the Pakistan People's Party, no, not the PPP, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, the PTI, they're not letting the PTI participate in the upcoming February elections. So this in itself is a bit of a, you know, weird situation Pakistan is, at least internally speaking. So I think, like, you know, Pakistan has its own problems to deal with than to, like, you know, try to pick a fight with Iran. This is just like, you know, like you said, like, it's telling Iran to, like, buzz off or back off, you know? So,
because they probably don't want to say this is a retaliatory strike because they struck us directly, because then they more or less imply that we are now at war, and they kind of want to keep it, you know, they kind of want to de-escalate the situation, but Iran probably is going to be even more escalatory forward. Because I think that the Iranic regime needs this escalation in order to unite people.
Yeah, considering Iran's situation right now, the Iranian public is completely Iranian regime at this point, especially the religious elite who have control of the armed forces.
To also be honest, it scares me also, because what are the alternatives to the current regime? Yeah. I'm kind of afraid that we are going to get something that was similar to the regime that, you know, was replaced by the current, you know, religious regime. People say that people usually, you know, whitewash that previous regime, or, you know, would portray it as much better than it was. It was in many regards way worse than what we have currently.
The Shah, like under the kingship of the Shah, right?
Yeah, and also his father. You know, you do know that they did do ethnic cleansings, right?
Yeah,
I mentioned it in a previous episode.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I think in terms of, like, with especially against, there was a lot of tensions. I know at least the Shah Pahlavi's father was, at least I would say, slightly better. And because the Shah, the one that got deposed, actually got rid of his father. His father was then taken to a prison, I think in Egypt or another African country, and he died in the prison there because he reunited. He used the help of the powers such as Russia, United States, and Britain to get into power, and he betrayed his father. And hence establishing his regime. So that is a very interesting aspect, because that happened towards the end of the World War, the Second World War. And then he was deposed there was a revolution, but then he was brought back again, and then he was gotten rid of by the religious, the the religious Ayatollah status who are able
Yeah.
to get.
I mean, but my entire thing is that the dynasty before was, there was a lot of infighting and there was a lot of suppression of
Free
anyone
speech.
that's, yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of like, the thing is, there was a silver lining where when he agreed to give Baha'i and women like women rights.
Yeah, he might have been religiously more tolerant and also more in more open when it came to women's rights. But there was a lot of other aspects where you could actually say that he was a lot more intolerant.
Especially in terms of like the ethnic issues.
Yes,
and as well as in terms of freedom of expression. That is, I think.
I mean, I'm not going to say that the previous regime was on this level of intolerance or brutality, but this is kind of like discussing if Adolf Hitler was the most intolerant, or if the Catholic Church during the medieval age was most intolerant.
Yeah, it's kind of like you can't compare, because it's like comparing apples to oranges, right?
Yeah. So, they are very intolerant in very different ways.
Yeah, so you cannot compare. And
also, better would have been South Africa, because you shouldn't compare to Nazi Germany because it wasn't that bad. But
yeah,
South Africa would have been a better comparison.
Oh yeah, and with Nazi Germany and South Africa, both were racially motivated, with just different. Yeah. But even then, you can kind of see the differences. One was more segregate, and the other was more into like establishing.
I meant more comparing South Africa to like some sort of hyper Catholic regime during pre-modern times or something, or hyper Protestant regime.
Yeah. But let's continue with this video.
Carrie Davis, who has been monitoring events there. So, Carrie, bring us up to date with the very latest on what's been going on between Pakistan and Iran.
Okay, wait. I just noticed U.S. military launches 4th round of strikes on Houthis in Yemen. Yeah, this is. I think we're also going to discuss this in the video too, because I think you wanted. We were discussing this as well. But let's finish with Pakistan and Iran first.
Yeah.
So early this morning, we had a statement from Pakistan's foreign ministry confirming that Pakistan had launched attacks on what they say are terrorist groups operating inside Iran. Now, this, of course, comes after Iran admitted yesterday that it had also carried out attacks inside Pakistan's borders on militant groups operating inside Pakistan. This is a bit of an ongoing discussion between Pakistan and Iran. There have been a lot of accusations over the course of years that Pakistan and Iran both accuse the other of harboring terrorist militant groups inside the borders that then come across the border, carry out attacks, and are then able to go back across, which makes it difficult for the nation's security forces to be able to go and get justice. So that is the backdrop to all of this. But the other thing to bear in mind is that Pakistan and Iran had, up until a few days ago, pretty cordial relationships. But at this point, that has deteriorated fairly dramatically. So we have had reports as well from Iran state media. They now say that 9 people are believed to have been killed in this particular strike that was.
And again, it's a release by the Iranian media, and it said 9 people are believed to be killed. Again, you have to read between the lines, believed to be killed, because we can't completely rely on the statistics, that is. So I'm glad that they actually brought that up. And another thing is, yes, the relations were cordial, but there has been a history of internal tensions. It's outwardly it's cordial, but there has been a history of internal tensions, especially Pakistani military believed that a lot of people coming from Quetta who used to go to Iran like for pilgrimage, that is, to like Mashhad, they used to believe that the pilgrims coming back were, even though they're Pakistanis, but they believed that Iran is training them to become fighters and go back to Pakistan. That was the accusation, and that's why Pakistan's military did kill some civilians in the northwest. So I think it was back in 2008, 2009, I don't remember. But that was what the military establishment believed. and or used as an excuse status. But a lot of the people in the Shia community of Pakistan were kind of like, no, they just discriminated against because they were Shia. And there may be a possibility to that. Again, maybe, huge maybe. Pakistan's own Shia population will also be in a sort of like a weird position because of the fact that like they kind of see Iran as an ally, but then they belong in the state of Pakistan. So this is also potentially a dangerous position for the Shia community that resides in Pakistan, mostly Twelver Shia, that is.
Carried out by Pakistan. What's really interesting in the language that Pakistan is using is that it's talking very strongly about targeting militant groups, not talking about targeting Iran itself. It's very.
This is where what you pointed out, Ginny. I think this is what you pointed out. Especially, it only said that it's targeting military, militant positions, and not targeting Iran itself. And this was, I kind of find it like, okay, this is kind of smart how you word this thing. It's a smart way to word it, because it's definitely trying to de-escalate, but also at the same time it's a pushback. So it is definitely interesting.
Very similar language, in fact, almost mirroring the same sort of thing that was said by Iran's foreign minister yesterday in Davos when he was talking and saying that Iran had carried out these attacks inside Pakistan. So will this all be now a line drawn underneath it? Both sides feel that they've both done the same thing, or will we see Iran decide to retaliate? Will we see a further escalation between these two countries? Bear in mind, the backdrop to this as well is that in the course of the last few days, Iran has hit targets inside Syria, inside Iraq, and then inside Pakistan. It seems to be trying to show a display of strength, showing that anything that it considers to be a threat is a target. So how will it?
Now, this is interesting. Iran attacking targets in Syria and also targets in Iraq specifically. This is where it gets very interesting. Yes, I know, D. Boudreaux, crazy times, I tell you. When it was never crazy times. As Ginny, you're the historian here. When was it never crazy times?
I mean, you always have had more or less crazy times throughout history. We have just been through an age that has been a little bit less crazy.
Yes. So, with Ginny, I think we were just talking about this earlier too. Like, there have been attacks in Syria and in Iraq, and now in Pakistan. And I think you were saying something like Iran is feeling desperate, or something along those lines.
The Iranic regime is feeling desperate, so they want to stir up trouble just to keep themselves alive by uniting the people against a common outer enemy.
Yes, and I think it's a strategy that has
the fact that they are even grasping at Iranic nationalism nowadays rather than just Shia patriotism means how much they are concerned with shoring up internal support, because they have even begun to speak out, you see it even in their propaganda, it being more concerned with, we must unite as Iranic people rather than we must unite as believers.
Yes,
because they are trying to also shore up, because they are also kind of like the Houthis, for example, are an asset that they are using for this, like a sideshow where they are giving them stuff so that they can easier attack and cause disruptions and such. But the real thing that drives Iranian policy right now isn't really support for Shiism, but it's rather just to keep themselves alive.
Yeah,
that is why they've also begun to you see this also how they begin to speak with the Shias in Iraq and begin to, because they are Arabs.
Yes,
and thus they are not of the people, and they are beginning to. It's kind of like they are also beginning to speak almost imperialistically towards the Iraqis more than they did before. Rather than unity of brothers, it's more like we are going to take back the older Persian Empire.
Yeah, that is in itself is a very frightening scenario in itself.
I mean, it's they did talk before about taking over Iraq, but that was more like on the grounds of we are going to unite the entire true Muslim world of true Shia believers.
Yeah.
But now they are more talking about we are going to unite it for the glory of Persia.
Yeah, that in itself, I think that they're trying to,
They are moving their discourse from religion into nationalism, which I think is just because they are so concerned about their power right now. So they need to, make concessions and talk about, oh, but we do care about you, the people.
Yeah. So they're trying to it's a slower shift. It's definitely an interesting shift because now you're gonna tell me, I'm like, this is because it's slowly removing away from the religious aspect because of the fact that 80% of the population is practically anti-regime at this point, anti-mullah regime or anti-ayatollah regime, so to speak. So it has become very, very, they're seeing that their power is on the decline. They know that there's a decline. And it's a very...
There was this famous thinker who said that even tyrants' power rests on the will of the people or something, or on the consent of the people.
Yes.
So, I mean, there was someone that said that. I don't remember who, or the exact quote, but it's kind of like that. You still need to do concessions even if you're a dictator or, absolutist monarch or whatever.
Yeah,
you still have to have some sort of grounding.
Yeah, especially with so many people turning against you, especially that situation. That would mean it is especially they're trying to say, oh, look at all these enemies attacking us. We must brace ourselves. We must prepare because we have so many external enemies. But I feel like this is going to backfire because even the public, their biggest concern is Iran has all this money to spend on militant groups abroad, such as Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Hamas, and even the Taliban to an extent, as well as certain other Shia, I would say, militia groups in Syria. So they have this money, but they don't have the money to spend it on the people or better their own system, that is. So I think that's where also a good part of the frustration is. Of course, there's the frustration of the women as well. That's 50+% of the population, 50+% that you are oppressing or trying to control. So they're seeing that, we do need this segment of the population, and especially in the younger generations. They're not buying the bullshit that the preceding generations did. So but let's listen to what the rest of this.
Feel having been hit, or at least having had a hit happen inside its soil, even if that was not targeted at Iran and its military operations. So that will be the key question here. Pakistan in its statement said that it referred to Iran as a brotherly nation. Well, that brotherly relationship is really under some strain.
So you mentioned it's under strain and we don't quite know how it's going to escalate or de-escalate after this. Are there any intermediaries that usually step in between Pakistan and Iran to try and have a diplomatic angle on this?
Well, it's interesting. We did hear from China yesterday, who had asked for restraint between the two countries in the way that they were going to respond to this. So that will be the big...
Oh, I nearly forgot about Daddy China. I nearly forgot about them. Because apparently China has alliances with both of them. And so does Russia. Don't they, Jenny?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's less alignment and more. Russia just wants chaos elsewhere so that they can focus on Ukraine and get less hindered there.
Yeah.
And China just wants to, oh, I will appease whatever side so I can continue to trade.
Yeah. I know China seems to be the more reasonable party here, weirdly enough. And
I mean, China also has interests. I mean, China is all. I mean, you also have to remember with both Pakistan and the Houthis that China has interests in Pakistan as a counterweight to India, but they also do not want total war there because then their trade will also be cut off,
yeah,
and they will have problems with getting resources and the like. And the Houthis threatening, the trade in the Red Sea will also threaten trade going to them and from them, which they need. And they also but they also, kind of do not want to get on the bad side of Iran because, Iran also sends stuff to them. And,
yeah,
China is very much us. I'm everyone's friend. Just trade with us right now.
Yeah, and especially
Except my closest neighbors, those I will dominate. Yeah, but I mean, you see, there's a reason as to why Vietnam, that is, also a communist country, have seeked a lot of, agreements with the United States, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, you see, people always think that China and Russia, they are cooperating. Sure, they might do it because currently China do not want to get into a conflict with a nuclear-armed Russia, but I can see the Chinese turning on the Russians if the opportunity presents itself in some way.
And it has happened before, hasn't it, during the time of Mao?
Yeah, it did. I mean, they got into conflict all the times. They even had border skirmishes, outright military border skirmishes.
Yeah, and of course, Dee has a good point. China has mines and has quite a few.
Yeah, that too.
The CPEC projects, that is. And
yeah.
They want Pakistan Sea as an access, because Pakistan provides the land access. And not only that, it's cheaper for them to get.
But they also don't want to get into the issues with Iran as well, because Iran can use their proxies and themselves to create issues for China. So it's kind of like, oh God, I'm dragged into this.
Especially and it's stuck between two, and these are two different. It's a regime that's stuck between two other authoritative regimes. Again, albeit one's a religious authoritative regime and one's the military authoritative regime. And Pakistan's kind of and Haris Sultan, I agree with him on this. It's a proto-democracy of sorts. Sure, we don't have a direct military dictatorship, but the military of Pakistan, or the establishment we call them, still controls politics, still has a big control in what happens in Pakistan.
Ironically enough, considering how the 19th century was with a lot of states in Europe, I am actually positive on the development of Pakistan in the longer view run.
Oh yeah? In what sense the development? In terms of...
I still have some hope for Pakistan, actually.
Yeah, in terms of things turning around, right? Things turning
around. Things turning around if you look at the trajectories. And actually, I discussed this about the Pakistani debt situation that people pointed towards, but many of those debts are actually some debts that Pakistan could cut with minor pushbacks if they really needed to.
They could, but at the same time, because I remember when the Russian invasion of Ukraine happened, the West was very angry that the Pakistani Prime Minister then, Imran Khan, went to Russia. But the reason he went there,
was to say, we are not going to pay the debts anymore.
Yeah, it's to get rid of the debts. Now, the Pakistani army made a scapegoat out of him. And it was all his idea, even though the Pakistani army was fully behind him on this. So, and Imran Khan alleges that the United States has supported the military in the coup, but I don't know how true that is, to what extent, because Imran Khan did come to the United States as well. So like, and was in talks with them as well. So it's like kind of like a very it's a little complicated. And considering that if Imran Khan was in power, this would have, I think it would have never happened. If anything, like something like this, it's
Maybe I still think Iran would have done it either way.
Yeah, I don't think Pakistan just really did what they were going to do. I mean, it's not gonna last forever. Like the birthright status, it's not gonna last forever.
Yeah, and you also have to remember that having low birth rates can also mess up your economy. That is what we are beginning to see the issues of in China right now.
And keep in mind,
demographics are a lot more complicated than just many babies bad. It can also be the other way around too.
Yeah, and keep in mind, there's a lot of overseas Pakistanis. Pakistanis going abroad too, which in itself it could be kind of an asset for Pakistan. It could be, but geographically speaking, it just sucks for Pakistan because you have the border with Afghanistan, you have the border with India, and you have the border with China, and you have the border with Iran. Like, it just sucks to be stuck in that situation. And I feel like if the military establishment, wasn't there, it could have, it could have improved in a lot of areas. Like, it could have used its position very strategically. But like I said, you're not wrong. Bad education, you're not wrong. There's a lot of fanaticism. There is this rise in fanaticism in Pakistan, but there's also a rise in number of ex-Muslims in Pakistan. Like, keep in mind, a lot of ex-Muslims in Pakistan, albeit Pakistan is afraid that there's a lot of atheists or atheism is growing in Pakistan. And a lot of people are getting turned off by religion itself.
In the 19th century, there were still countries in Europe, some of those countries that would become later known as some of the most industrialized countries, that still had, actually punishment for leaving the religion with execution and death.
Yeah. At least
that was the case in some of the Nordic countries.
Yes.
You couldn't belong in Sweden until even in the late middle of the 19th century. You couldn't belong to any other church but the Swedish Protestant church.
Yeah.
Without facing legal consequences in the form of actually pretty brutal punishments.
Yeah, and keep in mind, with Pakistan, over the last 70 plus years, everybody's been saying, oh, this nation's not going to last. This nation's not going to last. And it's still, I mean, it did break in the 1970s. No one get me wrong. Especially since Bangladesh separated. But there were other problems with there too. Like, that in itself is a whole, that is the fault of the Pakistani military for sure.
It's also was kind of like you're divided in two parts where, I mean, it didn't make sense to hold it together like that either.
Yeah, it especially the very basis on its own, it's gonna, it was doomed from the start. It was doomed, to be honest. Culturally, they were separate miles. They were separated by miles and all that stuff. Pakistan's also united, but not necessarily. No, not necessarily, because within Pakistan itself. So of course you have the Shia Muslims, but you also have like the Barelvi Deobandi Muslims, like Deobandi Sunni movement status, that are separate, and there are certain conflicts within Pakistan, even amongst different groups. So, like, conflicts, like, they aren't direct conflicts, but there are tensions for sure. So, but again, it may be united by the idea of Islam. It may be united by the idea of nationalism. Not sure, because again, there's also a lot of ethnic groups within Pakistan. It's very complicated, especially because you have the Punjab province, Baloch, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, again, Pakistani Kashmir, and Sindh. That is, you have all these, and of course Gilgit-Baltistan, like these 6 provinces. So you have like 5-6 languages or 5-6 ethnic groups at least. Let's continue with this. Sorry, I just wanted to finish this.
Big question, is China going to step in to try to be an intermediary between these 2 countries? At the moment, it seems fairly unlikely that either of them really want to have any form of escalation between the 2 sides. As I say, they normally have fairly cordial relationships. For Pakistan, it's in an incredibly fragile situation. It's meant to be having elections in less than a month. It's in a very fragile economic position as well. It's not got a great relationship, of course, with India, but it's also had deteriorating relationship with Afghanistan as well. Does it really want a further problem with Iran on another border too? And for Iran, of course, we've heard of multiple issues and things that Iran are dealing with around the world, different attacks, and it also dealing with attacks on different fronts. Does it want to have Pakistan also having some form of military confrontation? At the moment, both sides are talking about militant groups, very clearly saying that they are not attacking the state on the other side. But does that mean that there is still space for de-escalation at this point?
And what kind of reaction has there been in the media? Is it particularly tense at the moment as a result of all this?
Well, there has been, in social media, before the attacks happened, there were quite a lot of people arguing that there should be some form of military response from Pakistan. A lot of analysts thought that that was fairly unlikely because that's not been what Pakistan has done in the past. But of course, this is being covered very closely by the media here in Pakistan. I think that whenever there is a potential conflict between 2 countries, and we've not really seen something like this between Iran and Pakistan in recent history, this is a real sort of escalation of tensions between the 2 countries. That of course, is picked up by the national media. So the key question everybody is waiting for is, what will Iran do now?
Caroline Davis, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, so in this regard, especially like with with what do you call it, Pakistan, it's definitely in a very strange position for sure. Like economically speaking, they had like their worst year, the past year especially, and so like you said, and we were agreeing, it has its own problems to deal with. Like I don't think they want to open up another front, and
I mean, I also think that Pakistan does, sure, it is not. I mean, it's not a true democracy, but it's not like the regime in Iran either in many regards. It's a very different regime, and I do not think that they could unite in the same way.
Yeah, I mean,
they create tension. They might.
Yeah, they could only, like, if Pakistan were to go with war in Iran, I know, like, let's picture that scenario. They would definitely ask for aid from the United States. For sure,
yes,
they would ask for aid. And I think the United States would be more than happy to provide it, given that it doesn't want to get its hands dirty with Iran.
I mean, considering that the United States right now can't even send aid against, into Ukraine against Russia, I have my, the issue is that they might not do it at all either. So, but
there was a sale.
I do think that due to various reasons, the Pakistani, government isn't as prone to, these kind of expansionist or rather extremely aggressive foreign policy due to the fact that it would hurt them more than it would gain them. Unlike like in the case of Iran, where they are more desperate.
Yeah, Iran definitely seems more desperate in this point. And what is this? I think I heard on NPR that Israel hit IRGC. Yeah, Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Yes, they did. They did hit a Iranian Revolutionary Guard target, Israel too. So Iran is also kind of indirectly poking at Israel as well. And Israel's also doing the same thing too. Let's face it. I'm going to call a spade a spade, because both Iran and Israel, I'm seeing in very similar positions. I think they're losing public support, of course, for various different reasons, because within Israel, the war is starting to get unpopular amongst the Israeli public. And they're trying to sort of like drum up this propaganda that, hey, we're attacked from all fronts or all ends, and we must unite. So in Iran is also in a similar spot too. So because with Israel, like they've hit targets in Syria, they've hit targets in what do you call it? Of course, like Iranian targets, right? Iranian-backed targets. But then the U.S. military has also like had skirmishes with Iranian-backed groups as well too. So, and Syria is completely divided. So it's the situation in Syria. They're predicting that it might become the Syrian War 2.0, given that even Russia has upped its attacks with the help of the Bashar regime. So it's a very, 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 very strange situation. Pakistan belongs to 40 people, like not so much. I don't necessarily.
I wouldn't. Sure, I'm not an expert in Indian history, but I would say that the Mughals are quite different.
Yeah,
I mean, they and their gunpowder empire, together with the Safavids and the Ottomans, were products of an entirely different time with different, structures that are fundamentally different from anything today.
Yeah, very, very different time period too. Like the Mughal Empire, very different time period. I also
you can't just say that what is today is the same as back then.
No, not at all. It is completely different.
To call Pakistan any form of democracy is a rape of an English word.
Yeah.
An unreal production. Yeah. I mean, you aren't that wrong, but on the other hand, if you look at what was considered democracy in the 19th century and also in the 18th century, then you would probably have considered them to not be democracies either.
Yes. Especially how they operated very differently back then too. So Pakistan's kind of following that suit.
Yeah. This path of development, yes. Because I don't think that democracy is something that always must develop just by one revolution and then you have democracy. Often that actually fails. I think democracy is something that is developed through various smaller reforms a lot of the time.
Yes, I read somewhere that someone was putting up pro-Israel. I don't know how accurate it is, but there has been a certain like movements within Iran like that are pro-Israel. And I think it's more of a response to Iran supporting Hamas status. So I think it's more of a...
Now this guy, Google, what's my idea, have said this comment. Ukraine-Russia conflict is just a conflict. In a real war scenario, Russia could annihilate Ukraine. Same goes for Israel-Palestine conflict. No, if Russia had that capability outside of nuclear weapons, then they would have already done it, but they haven't managed to.
Yeah,
they're stuck. And anyone that says otherwise is obviously either not informed or is not honest about it.
Wait. You cut off in the middle there. I couldn't get the full thing.
Anyone that says otherwise, that Russia isn't stuck in Ukraine due to being hindered militarily rather than them keeping back their forces and not committing to the war like a real war, are wrong. Russia is getting in this stalemated in Ukraine because they can't advance, they can't crush Ukraine that easily.
And especially
with the exception of using nukes, but that's another thing. But it's not like Israel-Palestine, where Israel obviously is dominating the other part.
Oh, yeah. But the Israel-Palestine, that is more, it's a very, very, it's a very one-sided conflict. And Canada has released like an emergency act, like you can submit a form to get your family members to Canada from Gaza if you are a permanent resident or citizen of Palestinian descent. So like we have a situation, like the world is recognizing that this is getting out of hand. By the way, this is something interesting. Even though this happened in November, this was a report from November, but there's an accusation that Pakistan supplied Israel with weapons, like 155 millimeter shells, according to our report. And this is like, even though Pakistan is said to be supplying 155 millimeter shells to Israel amid its war with Hamas, despite Islamabad's long-standing support to the Palestinian cause and specific opposition to the existence of the state of Israel. This is funny. And I wouldn't be surprised if this were true, that even though Pakistan openly says, oh, I'm anti-Israel, but would sell weapons to Israel. An account on X, formerly Twitter, cited flight tracker data to claim that a British Air Force plane flew from Bahrain to Nur Khan base in Pakistan's Rawalpindi and reached an allied base in Cyprus via Oman. The British Royal Air Force's Arctic base in Cyprus has emerged as an international military hub to supply ammunition to Israel amid war with Hamas. Now, this is the X account or Twitter account. Earlier, Israeli newspaper Haaretz reported that over 40 U.S. transport aircraft, 20 British transport aircraft, and 7 transport flew to RAF to carry equipment, arms, and forces. U.S. planes landing in Nevatrim Air Force Base, located in southern Israel near Negev, has delivered arms for the U.S. For the Israel military. Haaretz also reported U.S. aircraft have landed in Ben Gurion, Tel Aviv, have carried other armored vehicles. So, what does this mean? Pakistan is one of the few countries in the world that does not recognize Israel. At the time of its inception in 1947, Pakistan voted against United Nations partition plan for Palestine. The back page of a Pakistani passport infamously comes with a cautionary note that this passport is valid for all countries of the world except Israel. And that is in the Pakistani passport, yes. So the Pakistani government has maintained throughout that it will not pursue a normalized relationship with Israel until the establishment of an independent Palestinian state, with East Jerusalem as Palestine's capital city. But there has been a history of Pakistan reaching out to Israel via Turkey. So this isn't the first time that's happening. In 2009, WikiLeaks reported that Pakistan's intelligence agency, ISI, had cautioned Israel against an upcoming terrorist attack in Mumbai, the 26/11 attacks, when Pakistan-based terrorists also targeted a Jewish cultural center. Following the success of the Abraham Accords in 2020, ousted Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan claimed that the United States and at least one other country had been putting increased diplomatic pressure on Islamabad to normalize ties with Israel. So there have been, sort of attempts, that is, to normalize relations. But I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if the Pakistani military is selling weapons. And this was kind of like there was an uproar about this. Nobody followed up. It went hush-hush. But I wouldn't be surprised. Between Ukraine and Israel, Pakistan is a producer of the types of basic munitions needed for ground assaults. In September 2023, the report in The Intercept had claimed that secret Pakistani arms sales to the U.S. helped Islamabad facilitate a much contested bailout from the International Monetary Fund. I would not be surprised if this is the case, that they would be selling arms in order to get themselves out. The arms sales were reportedly made for the purposes of supplying the Ukrainian military with 155 millimeter shells, amongst others. This claim was specifically denied by Islamabad, as it's emphasized its policy of strict neutrality in the Russian-Ukraine war. But again, the prime minister went to Russia to get rid of his loans, and also they're supplying Ukraine with weapons.
I mean, it's also kind of like for if you're skipping out on the loans to Russia, then you have more or less declared yourself that you are going to be an enemy of Russia.
Yeah, that also could be the case.
And then you might as well go in the entire way and also sell ammunitions and weapons to Russia's enemies, and also get further sales there. So
just to get rid of the loans and make money. It's a win-win. It's a win-win for them.
You have already thrown in your lot with against Russia. You might as well go the entire way and get more bucks in the bank.
Yeah.
And another production said everything in Pakistan, including Pakistan, is for sale to the highest bidder.
Where?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, but on the other hand, that is actually the case for most polities that have, been
Everything is
throughout
for-
history. Rich people rule.
Yeah.
But I mean, sure, there have been better and lesser cases of this. But I mean, people, even as early as the 19th century and early 20th century, you would be amazed by how much this was the case in the Western world, with rich oligarchical families more or less ruling everything, even in the so-called democracies of Europe and the United States. I mean, this was the age of the robber barons, of the great monopolistic capitalists, the great industrial fathers.
Yeah. So, but I don't know. This history could go in a weird, different direction. We never know how it's going to happen.
Things can change. I'm just saying that in the short run, I'm pessimistic, and also in the middle run. But in the longer run, I don't think it can continue.
Oh, for sure. Long run, I see some improvement for sure in the long run. But yeah, in the immediate times, yeah, it's a bit. But at the same time, I'm also skeptical of Pakistan's history as well too. Like how the military can continue, and with Pakistan itself, it's just in such a weird spot, like internationally speaking, but also it has to, in order to improve, it has to get rid of the blasphemy laws. It has to get rid of a lot of the Hudud ordinance. It has to get rid of laws that give the military more power. Like it has to get rid of both the religious and military powers altogether in order to see drastic improvement. If it wants drastic improvement, that is, because it does have the capabilities, it does have the land resources, it does have natural resources that can help itself, and it has the manpower to do so. It has plenty of manpower, no doubt about it. But yeah, it just has to get rid of the mindset that is, and that's going to take a long time. It's going to take a very long time. But that's me saying it as a Pakistani. That's what I see. But I could be wrong. I know there's no God I can pray to, but please, the universe, prove me wrong. Seriously, prove me wrong. And corruption, yeah, this is generally a problem in most countries, though. Corruption is a general problem in most countries, especially when it comes to money. So this is the situation right now. And one second, there was an article I wanted to talk about in terms of the Israel. Crap, where was it? Just give me a second here. Yeah, I wanted to talk about the conflict. Yes. Okay, one second. This is just a new update, that is. Yes, I accept these cookies. And of course, like you said, Ginny, Iran emerges from the shadows to broaden the proxy war with Israel. So Tehran and military shows force for the first time in the Gaza war. US sees Iranian overreach with the strikes that risk escalation. Now, the shape-shifting conflict in the Middle East saw Iran openly go on the offensive for the first time since the war in Gaza began, as Tehran's latest round of existential brinksmanship with Israel spread further from the tiny Mediterranean enclave. The show force broke with the stealth that comes to define Iran's role in the conflict after the allies like the Houthis in Yemen and Lebanon's Hezbollah led the military campaign in support of Gaza. It was a message from an emboldened Iran that relegated its proxies to the sidelines, signaling an appetite to replace an unstable status quo by taking the fight where it saw fit. So we're kind of seeing, okay, I think the rest of the articles like missing, or this is where, 1 second. So Iran accuses, there's also more, the widening Middle Eastern crisis, U.S. troops in Iraq injured, and attack linked to Iranian-backed militias, that is. So yeah, oh, come on, no more cookies. Oh, fuck's sake, now. Fucking hate these articles. Fucking hate this. Where's the news? Where was I? All right, thousands of outside PM's office. Oh, this is interesting. And the Times of Israel has posted this. So thousands outside the PM's home and in Tel Aviv urged immediate deal for hostages release. So smaller rallies, they are demanding that the IDF uncovers Gaza tunnel where 20 hostages occurs. Iran vows to respond to this Damascus strike. Hezbollah member killed in South Lebanon. Holy Jesus. So Heckle Envoy. So this has, how did I open this article? I opened this. Jesus. Okay, this is just a live plot.
Mose, Bodrio has a comment here. I can't believe American idiots are supporting the Houthis. Have they seen their flag? Ugh. Yes. Yeah.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised there are some idiots out there. I'm not very surprised.
But I mean, there are, unfortunately, there are people that, have kind of they always think kind of like this. If they are not Western, then they must be the weaker third world. And if they are weak, then they must be the true victims if they do bad things. And thus, we should always side with the victims. And I mean, there is also, virtue signaling and just anti-American sentiment among a lot of people that just use it. Even, self-hating Americans or people that want to virtue signal. Look at how progressive I am. Look at me, how I'm defending
the weak.
These, the people in the third world. Or there is also, it becomes even bizarre when they kind of associate Western values and Western, or rather associate liberal values with, the West, and everything else that goes against it as being good, since it's natural. It's like they essentialize people in the, third world, and they, see it as also that people in the third world have no agency of their own, so we can't judge them by any standards.
Yeah,
because judgment is also colonialistic as well.
Yeah, it's very it's a very confused position, but at the same time, like you always say, it's a little complicated because people have different reasons to be anti-American, very different.
You also have also people from the far left that also just hate America and opposes everything America does because they are supportive of various other regimes in the world. I mean, you do still have tankists that are, or radical left-wingers that still think that China in some ways better than the USA.
I actually came across some of those where you had some people even defend Stalin. It's like, what?
Yeah.
And we also have a lot of radical right-wingers too who will be anti-America when it's a Democrat in the office, but then will become suddenly pro-America if a Republican's doing the same thing. So
yeah,
it's kind of like that hypocrisy of it. There's a lot of hypocrisy as well going on, and it's a very strange situation. Also, this is another more escalation with Iran. Vows revenge on Israel after Damascus strike kills 5 Revolutionary Guard members. I think, you were talking about this. Iran on Saturday accused Israel of a strike in Damascus that killed 5 Revolutionary Guard members, the latest attack on the Islamic Republic's personnel abroad, and vowed to avenge it. Israel has been accused of intensifying strikes targeting senior Iranian allied figures in Syria and Lebanon, who are backers of the Hamas terror group, raising fears that the Gaza conflict could expand further throughout the region. Now, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards group confirmed it lost 5 members in the strike and that it blamed Israel, updating an earlier toll from 4. And again, it could have been just because like one of the members about to die and then he suddenly is dead. So it's not like that big of a jump. Hamas condemned what it called a heinous crime. The strike was a desperate attempt to spread instability in regions, said Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson Nasser Kanani in remarks reported to the state media. Iran reserves the right to respond to an organized terrorism of the fake Zionist regime at the appropriate time and place. Oh boy. Iran's president Ibrahim Raisi vowed to punish Israel too. The Islamic Republic will not leave the Zionist regime's crimes unanswered, Raisi said in a statement, state broadcaster. Quoting an informed source, Iran Mehr news agency said the Revolutionary Guards and Syria intel chief and his deputy were amongst those that were martyred in the attack on Syria by Israel. Mehr later quoted the Revolutionary Guard as saying that the 5th member wounded in the strike had died, like I said earlier. The Guard's Sepa news agency blamed the attack on the evil criminal Zionist regime and named 4 of those killed as Hojjatullah Omedwar, Ali Azizi, I'm probably butchering, Hossein Mohammadi, and Saeed Karimi. Noor News, which is believed to be close to Iran's intelligence apparatus, identified the dead intelligence chief as General Sadegh Ahmadzadeh. The mid-morning strike, which has sent a large plume of smoke skyward, was also reported by the Syrian state media. Official news agency Sana said a residential building in Maza had been targeted, what it called Israeli aggression. The Defense Ministry said the strike killed a number of civilians. Now, they haven't specified which civilians. The AFP journalist, said that the building had been reduced to debris. It was cordoned off, and ambulances, firefighters, and Syrian Arab Red Crescent teams were on site for the rescuers in search of survivors. So, they say that the resident says, we do not comment on the reports from, and I asked about the strike. The Israeli military told the AFP, we do not comment on reports from foreign media. Oh my God. And during more than a decade of a civil war in Syria, Israel has launched hundreds of airstrikes, primarily targeting Iran-backed forces as well as Syrian army oppositions. But such attacks have intensified since the war between Israel and Hamas, which, like Lebanon's Hezbollah terror organization, is an ally of Iran, began on October 7th. An official with an Iran-backed group in the Middle East told the Associated Press that the building was used by the Revolutionary Guards, adding that the Israeli missiles destroyed the whole building. So this is kind of another more weird form of like escalation. And it's January 20th. Today is what? January 20th. Holy fuck. So we're not even, like, allegedly, like, people have said that first Iran's picking a fight with Pakistan. Now Israel's picking a fight with Iran. A security source, part of the multi-story building, spokesperson for the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, said no members of the terror group were wounded in the strike following the reports that some bombed in the building. What are you guys doing there? What the hell are you guys doing, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad? Oh, boy. A grocer near the scene said that he had heard 5 consecutive explosions about 10:15 a.m. Yikes. They witnessed a body of a man and a woman being taken away. Jeez. The shop shook, like he's describing the smoke billowing from the middle. The alleged Israeli strike comes days after Iran fired missiles at what it said were Israeli spy headquarters in an upscale neighborhood near the sprawling, oh no, what it said were is an upscale neighborhood near the U.S. in Erbil, at the seat of Iraq's northern semi-autonomous Kurdish region. Oh no. Last month, it was killed in an Israeli airstrike in Damascus, but drawing Iranian threats of retaliatory actions. Recent weeks have seen several alleged sorties carried out against sites in Syria as part of Israel's ongoing efforts to prevent Iran from supplying arms to its proxy Hezbollah. This I can see as a possibility. Israel could be attempting to like.
Remember that it is the Times of Israel you're reading right now.
True. It's the Times of Israel, so you know there could be some bias in this. So Iran, which supports both financially and has hailed the devastating attacks as a success but denied any direct involvement. Now, keep in mind, like they're probably hinting that Iran could be behind this, so they could indirectly pin the entire blame of the October 7th attacks on Iran, because it's one of it's one of the funders. It's not the only donor to Hamas, because Hamas not only has donations from Iran, but it also has donors in Qatar as well too.
Yeah, and from private donors all over the world. I mean,
all over the world. Yes. So, if anything, it's a very it's kind of like it's more of a push and shove and like kind of seeing sort of like a test of strength situation at the moment. So I'm not sure, like, what do you think, Jenny? What do you think overall?
I think that, the more Iran and Israel gets, I mean, I would say that Netanyahu is almost built upon the same premise, even if it is a democracy. It is all, since his entire regime is built on the premise of fighting external enemies and keeping security through that, then he needs to escalate as well. Because the truth of the matter is that he was about to get into real issues when this event happened. This event in some ways actually saved him in a way.
The October 7th attacks, you mean?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, it kind of, weirdly enough, some people have, I know there are some reports that did state that Israel knew of the attack prior to the attack even happening. Like, Israeli intelligence was aware of this, and they chose not to act, or they chose to underestimate or neglect that what was about to happen. And I think it got him a lot of support. Like, Netanyahu's government and regime actually got a lot of international support, because everyone was condemning Hamas. Everyone was. And Hamas did lose, but yes, now there are people protesting in Israel for Netanyahu's resignation. And I think it's because of Israel's response, which has been not produced any good results. Because Israel kind of gave the game away. The Israeli military, not the nation, the military gave the game away that, we're going to destroy Hamas, and then we're going to shoot anything at sight. And it's disappointed. It's definitely backfiring now, given that, a lot of the focus has become now you're just having a lot of civilian casualties. And especially, actually, there's this one news item. Shoots hostages. This story that came out about the 3 hostages that Israel shot, this I wanted to actually cover, because this may have been a turning point. So 3 hostages, and I think it was around 3 hostages were killed by their own military, by the way. This was in December 22nd, this was reported. The 3 hostages, who had been in captivity for 65 days, received a glimmer of hope when they saw the Israeli soldiers arrived at the 5 days after the 3 hostages were mistakenly killed by the Israeli soldiers, an incident that has thrown Israel into a new phase of mourning and sparked public outrage. And these hostages include Alon Shamriz, Yotam Haim, and Samar Talgada, had emerged from a different building, bare-chested and holding a makeshift white flag. Legit, they had a white flag as surrender. And they were trying their best to indicate that, no, we're not fighters, we're victims. and they still got shot. And this was December 15th. But they were shot dead, who thought they were walking into an ambush and hadn't accounted for the possibility that escaped hostages could be moving around Gaza City, according to the preliminary IDF investigation. Now, again, the IDF is, of course, going to say, oh, what if this was, an ambush? The three had been held captive in the Shajia neighborhood, a long-term Hamas stronghold that has seen some of the fiercest fighting in the war. It was the site of Hamas ambush 2 days before, at which 9 Israeli soldiers, including a battalion commander, were killed. There is a direct link between the sad and unfortunate mistake in killing those Israeli forces and the other ambush incident, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Gurnett, international spokesperson for the IDF, said. Now, of course, he's going to say, oh, it's an unfortunate mistake, blah, blah, blah. They're not going to feel sorry.
No.
Yeah, they're not going to admit it. It's not clear where the hostages were taken during. I feel like the hostages could have also escaped too. You never know. Some people could have escaped and they tried to escape and only to get shot down. And sniper position more than 100 yards away that killed and wounded Haim, the IDF said. Haim then ran back inside when called for help in Hebrew. The battalion commander held fire, but when Haim re-emerged from the door, another soldier, against the orders of the commander to not fire, shot him dead. According to the preliminary, these guys are just out for blood at this point.
Yeah.
So this is this entire report. I can give you guys a whole thing.
Very poor fire discipline.
Yeah, very poor.
I mean, it seems also that they have trained their soldiers to actually just commit mass atrocities rather than actually following orders. And that is something that you usually do when you want to commit mass slaughters rather than have a disciplined fighting force. Because, I mean, the men that open fire, even when you give order not to, are dangerous men for your own troops.
Exactly. And that's going against orders. And that's you've practically trained, like you said, trained your guys to just shoot anything on sight. And or you have hired some fucked up psychopaths, or there's something to do with your brainwashing program. Something is
also be that they were under extreme pressure there, where they had been ambushed several times. But if that happens, you do not continue, and because it's pretty obvious when soldiers are hyper heightened up and when they can't continue anymore. You should have sent them back and sent in troops that actually were capable of handling the situation.
Yeah, and there's always something called approach with caution. There's always you can.
I mean, it's easy for us that aren't in a combat zone to say this, and I don't know how bad, or there are circumstantial, contexts that could be circumstances that could explain this action. Like they said, they had been ambushed before. And I can see people, snapping in those areas, but still, the most. I mean, when they do raise a white flag, and when they do, say in Hebrew, and you explicitly give them orders, and they still do it.
Yeah.
Then that points towards something deeper.
Yeah, and I think the part that you pointed out, when someone refused the commander's orders, that's where things are okay, something's fucked up here.
I mean, it could just be an individual, but that several soldiers does this means that it's more than just an individual. It's probably something greater of an issue.
Yeah, and it paints the picture that, the IDF doesn't even care about the hostages. And it's trying to gain the territory rather than,
I mean, the worst thing is that I hope that they say that the higher command gave this order. But, think about if they are lying, or think about if they actually gave them the order of kill them so that they become martyrs for the cause, or something like that.
You fucking never know. You never fucking know.
I mean, the issue is that you have several chains of command. And some, upper ups can give these orders and act on their own initiatives as well.
Yeah. You have those weirdos who will actually disobey orders, or even some people within command give orders but then back away, you know? So
Yeah.
it gets very, very dicey very fast, and especially during combat too. And I know
Yeah.
is rushing high. It's a split-second decision. I get it. But if someone has given you several seconds, you have to fucking
We will just assume that they are telling the truth until we have actually proven that there is any lie. But I would still look up the commander that said that he ordered them to not shoot, because it could be that they actually ordered something else. But even with that, let's assume that they did order them and then they shoot anyway. When they shoot your own people that are hostages, when you have been given explicit orders to not shoot, I mean, it's just such an off. And also when they shot people with, you know, white flags as well before, and it's, you know, somehow it should have just been, you know.
There are ways.
Yeah. The commander would have said stop here if he actually cared.
Yeah, and honestly, and this is how the families have responded, by the way. I'm going to read the families' responses. Trigger warning, by the way. I'm going to say this to them. You murdered my son twice, Avi Shamri told him. News Haley Jackson. You let Hamas take my son on October 7th, and you killed my son on December 14th. Leila Talkaka, mother of Sanaa, who is Bedouin Israeli, said the government's apology was too little too late. No one helped bring my son back. But the mother, Yotam, released an audio recording comforting soldiers who were responsible. I am Yotam, so I want to tell you that I love you very much and I hug you from here, from far. Jesus. This is a weird lady. Arias said in a recorded message, I know that everything that happened is absolutely not your fault and nobody's at fault except that of Hamas. Now, there definitely is, like, as a mother, I'm like kind of like very, as a parent too, I would be like, what the fuck? Because sure.
I was about to ask that. Are you do you identify as a woman when you said as a mother, but then you changed it to
like,
as a parent?
As a parent, I'll say as a parent, like, what the fuck? What the fuck is wrong with you, woman? Like, seriously, why are you sure the kidnappers kidnapped your kid? But your fucking like military shot him down because they
the Brodrio here states the Israeli army is being held to a super high standard. To be fair, while Hamas is held to none. I would say that this isn't actually a high standard. No, when it comes to Hamas, I agree with you that Hamas is usually held to no standards at all, and that is an enormous issue where Israel is. But in this case, when you did have, you know, a lot of things that went wrong here, or didn't go wrong, depending upon if this even was planned or something. I mean, this is something that where it's clearly the case that it's wrong here. You do not shoot on people that actually raise white flags. That you know, in this case, even were hostages, is not, you know, combatants that had surrendered or pretended anything. And you also had, after that happened, when one fled in and even, you know, phoned and said, I'm an, you know, Israeli speaking Hebrew. And then when you gave orders to the group to not shoot them when they get out, and then after that they shoot them, then there is obviously some sort of issue that is structural, because you had several incidents by several people.
And not only that, the reason the Israeli army is held at a high standard is because not only does it have the most support and most weapons and more power, it's an army that's supposed to be representing a democratic nation, isn't it?
It's not only that, it's also supposed to be an organized force as well, by Western standards.
You're comparing an international force that's supposed to represent a democracy versus a terrorist group. And Hamas is a terrorist group. So we don't hold standards for terrorist groups because we know they're gonna, you know, fuck shit up. And we do have people that excuse their behavior by saying that they are the weaker part and the like, that they need to do it. I'm not doing that. I'm not excusing anything that Hamas is doing. Let's be very clear here. Yeah. But as I've said many times when it comes to discussions about the Israel-Palestine conflict, and this is why I hate this conflict,
is that both sides have enormous issues. They are different at times, but both sides have enormous issues. And when you point out that both sides do messed up things, and also adds more, and that both sides add fuel to this fire, and just want it to get worse due to various reasons, then you usually get attacked by one side or the other.
Yeah, and honestly, like a lot of Gazan civilians are desperate, and they just want to get the hell out. They want to save themselves. And
yeah, that too.
I was hearing this interview of a Gazan survivor. By the way, I'll post a link. Let me just post a link for the Gazan survivor. That is 1 second, Gazan survivor, and she was telling us the story of like they are so done with this conflict, and it just strung my heart. Like they are so done with this conflict that I'm just gonna post a link. 1 second. It's a long, it's a podcast. It's an hour-long podcast, but I'm not going to react to it. I'm just copying the link here, Command C, and then I'm just pasting it on the here. That is, I'm just going to post it here. You guys can check out the link. I'll probably comment later the link too, but this is a story about Gazan survivor May Salam, and she is trying to get her family out of Gaza. She's in Canada currently, but she is trying desperately to get her family out. And it was just sad to hear her story, because it's like she said, like, we legit don't care about anymore. I want my family out of there. And it was so sad to hear that, and it was gut wrenching. And it's like, we gotta stop. We gotta have some way to stop this conflict, And so basically, this is where we kind of agree that this conflict's not doing anybody any good. But I know it's gonna be. By the way, Junni, I wanted to end this fairly early in about 3 minutes or so. But if you wanted to discuss anything else, or do you have any takes overall?
I would just like to quickly discuss the fact that what Netanyahu is doing is kind of like mirroring the regime in Iran, since I do think that both are incentivized to actually escalate conflicts more because they needed to legitimize themselves.
Yeah, especially when they're targeting outer enemies and they're trying to get their public to support them. Because I think when you, when Dee mentioned that people in Israel are protesting not only this war, but also calling for Netanyahu's resignation, it goes to show that he's losing support, or his regime is losing support. And they're doing the same thing as Iran did to Pakistan, for example, trying to pick a fight somewhere else. Now, Israel is weirdly lucky not to have a neighbor like Pakistan, I would say. I know I'm a Pakistani, but it's weirdly lucky not to have a neighbor like Pakistan, because that's a nuclear power right there. And that could be like, hey, buddy, back off. So Israel's weirdly lucky in that situation, that it doesn't have neighbors.
I'm actually surprised that Iran actually had the idea of actually attacking Pakistan that openly with the missiles, because they are playing with fire in a way. And that was a little bit of a point I thought about. Hopefully they are still a non-nuclear power, but you cannot, the thing is, I'm afraid that Russia might give them something or something.
Or we don't even know of their nuclear program at this moment, because remember the deal right? So
they could have begun to develop something, and then they're going to saber rattle. Oh God! If you a state that is a regime that might be on the verge of collapse, that is desperate to create an outer enemy and is nuclear armed.
Yeah,
this could turn out bad if that's the case, but we should just assume that it is not until otherwise.
Yeah, and we'll hope for, honestly, like things to de-escalate, and also the Gazan conflict to like kind of quiet down, because this conflict is
I mean,
still fire.
de-escalate. It might also be positive that it escalates, because then the Iranian regime might overstretch. But yeah,
Yeah, there is a silver lining. Yeah, he said. Oh, yeah, he said. Netanyahu said
yeah, that.
Palestinian.
But Netanyahu isn't interested in peace. He wants escalation because he needs it to feed his own legitimacy.
Yeah, and I think this is where the
And he talked about removing the West Bank too.
yes, because the West Bank itself is under an internationally recognized Palestinian Authority, and
Yes.
the West Bank itself is used to be also an under Jordan, by the way, the Jordanian kingdom.
Yeah.
So the West Bank, if it starts doing that, there's and there has been a significant rise in settler violence, as you were talking in our previous episode.
Yes.
So this is kind of like very concerning, because the West Bank isn't even part of this conflict, yet it's influenced by this conflict, because ever since the attacks or the Israeli invasion, there have been more and more skirmishes in the West Bank, that is. So it's becoming a little like it, and it goes to show the scenario where if Hamas didn't exist, this shit's still happening. It's still a one-sided conflict, despite being under an internationally recognized authority. So
Yes. This is my entire you know my point before when I said that it isn't if the Palestinians lay down their weapons there would be peace. No, it would just be even more one-sided in one direction.
yeah, so
Push.
again, we're not excusing Hamas by any means.
No, we aren't.
But we do understand if someone within Gaza supports Hamas, we understand you have to pick an either. Like, it's.
I mean, both sides here are bad. There is no good side in this conflict.
Yeah, you just have to select the evil that's more, I would say, convenient.
Yeah, kind of. And but I would also say that there isn't going to be peace until Israel is forced to actually be peaceful in a way as well.
And I think the United States is getting a lot of pressure to put pressure on Israel.
Yeah, and I also think that ultimately, I think that eventually, if the problem is that the Israeli state is also pretty unstable due to, I've talked about internal issues within the Israeli state between various Jewish groups.
Yes.
Right. Yes. My view of it is that the Israeli state would, if they did not have all of these outer enemies, actually collapse in on itself.
Yeah, you never know. You never know. Like, because I've had like Israeli citizens tell me like about there are a lot of internal problems. There are, and we could we tend to get distracted by Israel's foreign policy, but we aren't aware of what's happening inside.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked into it sometimes, and because I have a friend that belongs that is Jewish, all right, and he belongs to a Jewish group that isn't mainstream Judaism.
Right.
He's what is known as a Karaite.
Yes.
Which is a Jewish other sect that does not believe in rabbinical Judaism, but they reject a lot of the secondary Jewish sources in favor of more focusing upon the written Torah and the Old Testament.
Yeah.
The rest of it, rather than having the Talmud and other sources. But they have also felt increased pressure there in Israel. And you also know a lot of other groups from Ethiopian Jews that
are discriminated.
Discriminated, sterilized.
Yeah.
And had a lot of other stuff. You have, I mean, the ones that died here, I noticed their names. They were Mizrahi Jews, or Middle Eastern Jews.
Yeah.
I mean, you do have a lot of discrimination towards them too, by certain sections of Israel too that are dominated by Western or East European Ashkenazi Jews, which are different from like South European and to a certain extent also Middle Eastern Sephardi Jews.
Yes, and there are tensions within ethnic tensions, that is.
Yeah, ethnic tensions, religious tensions, political tensions between radical, groups. I think. I mean, the problem is Judaism is kind of like Christianity and Islam in that it is actually more of a civilization than it is one culture.
Yeah, it's definitely not a homogeneous.
It isn't.
Yeah, like it is similar, but it also makes it worse that it's not just a religious group; it's also an ethnic group as well too.
I mean, it isn't even a ethnic group; it's ethnic groups. With some sort of shared religious experience.
Please, this gets more complicated.
So I mean, if you look at an Ashkenazi and a Sephardi Jew and a Mizrahi Jew, and then also look into a Habashi Jew from, they are not that like if you look at them. I mean, if you look at an Ashkenazi Jew, you're going to look at the stereotypical European Jews, with everything associated with them. If you look at the Sephardi Jews, they are quite different, but they are still in Europe, but they are in Southern Europe and have a lot of cultural influence from Southern Europe and from, the Mediterranean, Middle Eastern world, also Turkey. They are also on, in parts of North Africa as well. They are going to look also a bit. They are going to look Mediterranean, and and the Mizrahi Jews, the Eastern Jews that live in the Middle East, are going to look Middle Eastern and have very different also views. The Habashi Jews or the Ethiopian Jews, they have their own scriptures, so they are also religiously different. But but they are still a subset of rabbinical Judaism, so they are not that different from. So it is kind of like they do follow rabbinical Judaism, which is also followed by most people in these other groups as well. But they do have their own spin on it. They are kind of like an early branch of it that evolved a little bit different, kind of like how the Maliki school have their own hadith collections and the and it's a little bit different from the other.
Yes.
Madhabs in Sunni Islam. And the Karaites are kind of like Shia Islam of Judaism. They are the alternative, but they are also very different. But but you can be like a Karaite and be a Sephardi Jew, or a Karaite and an Ashkenazi Jew. You understand? It's kind of like it's not your ethnicity, but that's your religious connection. So you have those lines too. So you can be different both ethnicity and religiously, or you can be alike in religious but be different ethnicities, or you can be the same Jewish ethnicity but have different Jewish religious versions of your faith.
God. This is kind of like, oh no.
And now we are just speaking about the broader groups of rabbinical and and Karaite Judaism. We are not even going into the subsects of these groups. Like you have the madhabs, the schools of thought within Islam. You have similar within Judaism, and that isn't even the same thing as when we talk about liberal or Orthodox and ultra Orthodox, because those are just how religious you are. They do not define your subgroup. So you have those things as well. You atheists and secularists too, people that do no longer care about the religious elements, but just want to be a part of the cultural continuity as well. So you have those people as well.
Yeah, I've come
across
these Reform Judaism.
All of these groups, some of which actually hate each other and have historically actually, whenever they have gotten the chance, have persecuted each other. You can hear stories about how Karaites and the rabbinical Jews, how they acted during the Holocaust with giving information about each other.
Jeez. Oh,
Yeah,
jeez.
so there are real hatreds here between various of these groups, and now they are joined in one nation in the Middle East with everyone hating them around them. I mean,
Oh, fuck.
do you think it might be the case that if they didn't have the outer pressure on them, that they might have begun to cause issues with each other within?
I think, yeah, and I think this is also another reason for the external conflict too, that it kind of keeps them together in a weird way. It's a fucked up way.
It does. The external threat keeps them unified. I mean, and that is also one of the reasons why I don't think that Israel can stop. Because they said, we had this discussion several months ago when they said, "Oh, if it wasn't for Palestine, we would have had peace." No, you would have continued into Jordan or other Arab countries, because I don't think that you can stop.
Yeah, especially because they've had conflicts with Egypt and Jordan in the past, as well as Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. And they would extend and continue there, because I don't think that the problem with Israel is that it is an unstable state in a certain ways, because you have become too diverse.
Yeah.
I'm not against tolerance and certain plurality in culture and religious matter, but there comes a point where you have too many groups and too many various conflicting groups where it becomes unstable.
Absolutely, yeah.
And this unstable internal nature results in external. External conflicts, because you want to canalize that outwards.
Yeah, and I think, but it has to stop somehow. It has to stop.
I mean, I do think that it will stop somehow. Your voice is cutting out, Mose.
How about now?
I'm hearing you now.
Okay, now I think this is a good way to leave cap off the discussion. Thank you, Jinni, so much for.
Yeah.
I would say you overcomplicated, but also explained it, but also overcomplicated it.
Yeah, I do think we have gone for a theme in this discussion, though, with all of these events, and that has to do with how internal problems and how internal issues of regime stabilization and regime legitimacy causes external conflict.
Yeah. And there is influence each other. They do influence each other indirectly, for sure.
Yeah.
And but thank you so much for joining me today, Jinni. You put up with me on this topic. I know you don't like this topic much.
No.
Put up with me with this topic, because again, we were requested to cover this story by Drastic Measures, that if we wanted to cover this story and how it the Israel-Pakistan conflict and how it links to the current conflict. So we discussed a lot of things today, but thank you so much, Jinni. Thank you, viewers. Yes. Thank you, D, and other viewers whoever watch this. And if you watch later, thank you so much as well. Please do share, and subscribe, or please try to trick the YouTube algorithm. I hope the title tricks the YouTube algorithm to get more views. But anyway, thank you so much, Jinni. And we'll see you next time. Bye now.
See ya.